Hello and welcome back to Key Comic Universe. Today I'm going to be talking about the Moon Knight TV show. That just ended a little while ago. So I want to get a few things out of the way. First off, I will not be using any clips of the show just to avoid any copyright issues or having this video removed. I just want to avoid that altogether. Secondly, I am a huge Moon Knight fan. Moon Knight is my favorite character, so I'm going to try to be as honest and as fair as possible in my opinions, uh, views, and so forth. If you think I'm off, that's completely understandable. And then third, and finally, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, it would be pretty dope. And if you want to see a more condensed review of this, check out my Instagram page at Key Comic Universe. I just put up the other day kind of a shortened review of what I thought. And now I want to go over just some of the non-spoiler related stuff. And then probably for a good part of the video, I will be getting into spoilers. So I will let you guys know when I get into those and give a good warning just in case you have not seen the show. Okay, so first off, huge Moon Knight fan. Own pretty much almost all of the comics. I've read pretty much every single Moon Knight related book. Just love the character. So my expectations going into the show were, I would say, probably higher than they should be. Because I know a lot about the character, really just enjoy him in the comics. I don't think there's really been any run that was absolutely horrible, except for maybe a few issues from Mark Spector Moon Knight that were just super 90s. But besides the point, I'm just happy the show actually got released. I'm happy that it came out. I'm happy it came out early. And I think that's just like really cool that Marvel decided to go with a lesser known character and really do something really cool with him. Okay, so first off, I want to get into kind of some of the actors. So pretty much at this point, I think everyone knows who the actors are in the show. But starting with Oscar Isaac, amazing actor. He was really good as Mark Spector. He did an awesome job. Yeah, just really good. The person, what's his name? Arthur Harrow, aka Ethan Hawke in the show. Again, another really good actor. He was pretty good in it, and no major complaints. And then finally, I don't remember the exact actors' names. I forgot to write it down, but the person who plays Layla and the person who plays Khonshu were also stand out in the show. Those are just a few of the actors I think did a really good job. Okay, so solid acting. So yeah, that's always a good start with a TV show. You know, you need actors who can act. Okay, next is that the first few episodes were extremely interesting. It was revealed in the trailers that there would be horror inspirations in the show, and that definitely comes through. And I think the best examples are the first few episodes, and that's really awesome that they decided to do something like that. And it was really cool to just see that in a Marvel project, something a little bit more, you could argue, darker. So yeah, it was really cool. Next, they do reference stories from the comics. I'm not going to say which stories in this part of the review, but the stories referenced, awesome. Some really cool shots taken just straight from the comics. I mean, hey, always love that type of stuff. Next, the special effects in the show. Um, I kind of felt a little bit mixed on them, but overall, the CGI that was used was decent for the most part. There were a few times where I was like, oh my gosh, this really doesn't look that good. This really isn't that convincing. And other times it's like, wow, I can't believe they did something like that. So, kind of mixed on that, but hey, still pretty good. And finally, I just want to bring up the editing. They did a really good job editing it, especially just like I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't. But let me just say the editing was amazing. It added a lot. I think the music was pretty decent overall. So yeah, there were some definitely good elements in it. There were a few things that were disappointing that I can talk without giving away spoilers. For example, some of the treatment of the storyline from the comics was, ugh, gross. Why would you do that? Secondly, some of the treatments of the characters, ugh, gross. Why would you do that? And then also some parts of how they treat the character of Mark Spector. It was kind of like, huh? I mean, sure, but some of it was just the treatment of the original source material. I felt like could have been done better. And I think that's where the show really falls flat, is in how they utilize the source material. I'm not saying that the show has to be exactly like the comics. The comics are so diverse across each individual story that, you really couldn't do that with a TV show. But at least treat the source material well. At least say, oh, hey, here's a reference to this, or something like that. Yep, cool, okay. That's perfectly fine, but don't just go out there and purposely change the source material, or change how the show utilizes it. And I'll get into that more in the spoilers, which, let me see if there's anything else that I need to talk about. Okay, so before getting into spoilers, I wanted to say that some characters were extremely underused and some were extremely overused. It felt like, why did you use this character so much, and why didn't you use that character as much? I'll talk about specifics in a moment. And then I just also want to say that some of the villain moments were just really weak. And there were also a few weak episodes where I just felt like, that's really all you got to offer? That's really it? And yeah, now I'm going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the show or you don't want it spoiled, don't watch really any further beyond this point, because I am just going to talk about spoilers the rest of the time. So, obligatory spoiler warning. There are spoilers. I will be talking about them. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. I hope you heard that, because I don't want anyone complaining, oh, I wasn't warned about spoilers. No. Here we go. First off, the character of Layla. She's not from the comics. I mean, there was some characters that, you could argue she was kind of like, but honestly, that was one of my biggest complaints, is the use of the character of Layla. They could use Marlene. They could use Stained Glass Scarlet. They could use a lot of characters in the show. But they decided to just create an original character for no reason. I think it would be more challenging in a way to come up just with, an original character and be like, oh yeah, we're going to make this work. They could use so many different characters, so many different storylines. And they're just like, nah, we're just not going to do that. Oh, yeah, sorry, we're just not going to do that. I'm like, why? Now, that's not saying that Layla is a bad character or anything like that, but she basically just replaced Marlene from the comics and felt just really cheap, kind of lazy, and just really dumb. It was like, why? Yeah, a character that was already around that people care about from the comic. Well, at least people are into Moon Knight and stuff like that. But it's like, why didn't you just use, like, Marlene? You could use, once again, Stained Glass Scarlet. You could use one of his other love interests. And you're just like, nah, bruh. No, we're not going to do that. And then also at the end, her becoming, what's the word they use in the show? I don't want to say disciple, but basically the mouthpiece for one of the Egyptian gods. It was like, okay. I really didn't feel like she was that important. I mean, look, we get that Khonshu was interested in using her, sure. Okay, that makes sense. Khonshu wants someone kind of similar to Mark, or even kind of close to Mark in the future. Who knows the reasoning? Who cares? Okay, I'll just accept that. I'll suspend my disbelief. And then some other Egyptian god was like, nah. I'm just going to have you go fight for me and, prevent Ammit from taking over the world. And yeah, I was just like, wow, this just feels really contrived. Next, underuse and overuse of characters. Okay, Arthur Harrow in the comic books showed up for just one appearance. He only had one appearance in comics. So, I understand using a lesser-known character to basically be the main villain. Honestly, he really didn't feel like the main villain quality after the first 2 episodes. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a little bit, just based upon his character work and kind of why he's a bit of a weak villain. But here's my thoughts. Okay, they brought in Margot, aka Midnight Man. And I hope I didn't get that name wrong, because that will feel really dumb. But I'm pretty sure I got that name right. But, Midnight Man in the comics. Awesome character, right? You can do a ton with Midnight Man and make him interesting, or even change him up and make him unique. You just have future seasons with maybe, introducing his son or something like that. And they just decided, nah, bruh. He's going to show up for one episode for like 10 minutes and do absolutely nothing. And I was like, wow, I was pretty invested in seeing him show up, and then he does nothing. It's like, okay, Marvel, that's cool. Okay, next, Amot. Honestly, what I would really thought would have been better is setting up Amot from the beginning. Not as like someone who's being referenced to, but just introduce the character maybe in flashback or ancient Egyptian. Really just let us know why we should fear this character. Because all that we're fearing is Arthur Harrow. We're just like, okay, we need to stop Arthur Harrow because he's trying to do bad things. But then at the end, when they do bring him out, it feels like, this should have been like the person, we should have been afraid of or introduced to in some way beforehand. Instead of just Arthur Harrow being like, oh, I'm basically, bring this god back. And it's like, okay, sure. And maybe I'm not getting my point across super well, but I hope you understand what I mean with that, is that, you really just want a clear villain from the beginning, and maybe like some henchman type of villains or something like that. And, honestly, Arthur Harrow, he feels more like a henchman villain for the majority of it, because basically just is a super henchman. That's really all he is, and it's like underwhelming at best. And okay, I'm not saying Arthur Harrow is horrible or anything. Like, he was downright like frightening in the first 2 episodes. It's like, wow, this guy's pretty intimidating. But the more that's revealed about him, and the more we see of him throughout the show, he just gets more and more. It just shows more and more that he really isn't the best villain. And if you've seen the show, I hope you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's enough of him. That just kind of goes in with the whole weak villains thing, and it's like, okay. Next, CGI. Now I did mention that I did like some of the CGI, and that was mainly during the scenes where it was not monster CGI, just little bits of CGI here and there. That's fine, but the monsters in the show, like Amot, Khonshu towards the end, etc., just looked kind of awful. Especially like the giant monster fight at the end, because of course we need that. We don't, but it just kind of was like, oh, that could look way better. Or if they put more on a smaller scale, it could look a lot better. Like, just having a Amot grow huge, it's kind of like, okay. And I still don't know at the end if people can see Amot or not. It doesn't seem like anyone can see her except for like Mark Spector and Arthur Harrow. I don't think anyone else can see Amot at the end, at least from my understanding. So it's kind of like, and maybe Layla can also see Amot, but from my understanding, no one else is seeing it, and it's not really affecting too much except for, how the characters are reacting to it, the main characters. So my whole thought is, why don't you put them on a normal scale and to show Amot growing more powerful with the increased number of souls? Not with, like, increasing in size, but maybe increasing in power, strength, something like that. And then once you put the CGI on smaller scale, it could look a lot better. But no, that's kind of nitpicky, I guess. But it's kind of like, okay. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the structure of the show. So the show is structured pretty much like any other Marvel show for the most part. You introduce the character in the first episode. The character is out of costume for some of it, and this is where it kind of differs. Instead of the character really suiting up and really getting involved in battling or anything like that, it's just more like, oh, Mark Spector is running around. Oh, Mark Spector is in a pyramid. Oh, Mark Spector is in an asylum, most likely dead. And then when it's revealed, he says, like, okay, well, it's fairly obvious. But, yeah, the structure of this, you never really got that big superhero moment. You never really got to see Moon Knight be Moon Knight. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But as is, the structure is like any other Marvel show, but less interesting. It's like they took the structure and watered it down. I don't know how they did it, but they watered it down to the point where it's like, oh okay. That's cool. Next week episode. Now, usually with Marvel shows, whether it's Netflix or Disney Plus, you usually get like a 1 or 2 really good episodes at the beginning, and then episode 5 and 6, or the last 2 or 3 episodes are really good, and everything in between kind of ranges in quality. With this show, that just kind of pushed even further, because the show kind of had an identity crisis about halfway through, where was really horror inspired and honestly trying to be frightening. And then the further it went along, it just became more and more of a generic superhero show, but without superheroes, if that makes sense. But yeah, I was just like, oh man, this is just really bad structurally because honestly, the first 5 episodes, you're waiting for the big moment. The first 5. And then episode 6 is a big final battle. They don't really ramp up the tension. They don't really ramp anything up. And I'll get more into that in a bit. But they never really ramp anything up to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm fully invested. This is about to be the greatest action scene of all time. No, the action scene at the very end just kind of comes out of nowhere. They're like, okay, Mott's free, Khonshu's free, battle scene. And that's pretty much all the tension you get. And I'll talk more about that when I get to the monkeys. Okay, next, changing themes. And this goes in with the week structure, is that they had an identity crisis about halfway through, changed the theme, changed pretty much everything, you could say. I mean, except for like maybe the pyramid mummy, but you could tell that they were going further away from the horror themes. And that kind of hindered the show in the way of, just that tonal shift. Because if you're watching it week to week, you don't notice as much. But if you're going to watch the episodes back to back, it just comes out of nowhere. You're like, okay, what? What just happened? So yeah, I think that also could have been fixed if this show was like 10 to 13 episodes. It needed to be longer. It was so condensed and so shortened that they didn't have enough time to work out the character or work through everything they wanted to explore. And everything kind of got crammed together. And it was like, wow, this is interesting. Okay, next, the hippo and the monkeys. Honestly, the worst character of the show, I couldn't talk about this earlier because it's kind of a spoiler, is the hippo character. Yeah, no offense to the voice actress, but just for this role, it didn't work. The voice just did not work, and it was really kind of irritating. And on top of that, what was I going to say? I just lost my train of mind. And on top of that, she's not really funny. It's really unfunny. I watched the Marvel shows with my family because it's kind of still a family get together because we used to go to the movies together when I was younger, and it was always kind of been a family thing. They were also pretty unimpressed by the hippo, and normally they're a little bit more open to like these characters and stuff like that, more so than I would say myself. So yeah, the hippo character, and she didn't even have to be in the show. The show would have been fine without her. If you watch the show and you pretend she doesn't exist for when she shows up, you will notice that everything would still make sense, and they could have replaced her with literally anybody. And sure, maybe in Egyptian history, maybe it's it makes more sense, but just how it is for the show, it's kind of like, okay, meh, who really cares about this character? And also the monkeys. It was probably the biggest non sequitur of the show is when the monkeys show up and then they just disappear. Yeah, I still can't get over that. Oh my gosh, follow the monkeys. And you never see them again. What did they serve? Yeah, they put in mice. They would have just said, follow the mice. So, yeah. Well, and again, if you haven't seen the show and you're still watching, just look up that scene. It's so dumb. Okay, next, Randall Spector. This is one of the biggest issues I have with the show. One of the biggest gripes. And it might sound stupid, like, Randall Spector? He wasn't even in the show. Well, they called him Ro Spector in the show. Ro Spector. Okay, so in the comics, Randall Spector is actually a legitimately awesome character. Super frightening serial killer. Has a really cool backstory. Really awesome. Basically, in every single story he ends up in. And in the show, he shows up for 5 minutes and gets killed as a child. And never shows up again. Wow, you just wasted an awesome character. Wow. Good job, show. I love it when you waste other characters. And it kind of go back to my underused and overused argument. But again, they just kind of wasted good characters and just kind of put out the characters that no one really cares about and try to make them feel important. And that really just didn't work. And there was also lack of Moon Knight. Like, Mark Spector in costume shows up for like maybe 30 minutes total in the entire series. Like, maybe a half an episode altogether. He's barely in the show, Moon Knight. And Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, they're pretty much the whole focal point of the show. It's more of a drama, it's more of a character study if you want to look at it that way. But yeah, and then also, it makes no sense why Stephen Grant is British. I mean, look, if you read the comics, not British. If you read the comics, he's kind of similar, more or less, but, they could just set the show in New York, and the show would still make sense. I know they're trying to branch out to other places, but it would still make sense if it was in New York. It's kind of a minor gripe, but okay. But my biggest issue with, like, the Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, and Jake Lockley personalities is the use of Jake Lockley. He just shows up at the end to kill a dude, which, okay, sure, but it doesn't really work so much. And in the comics, I just feel like, just doing direct comparison, Jake Lockley is definitely, just from what we've seen, more interesting in the comics and very different in the comics. And, I talk about that more at the end of the video. But honestly, the use of Jake Lockley, weak, garbaggio in a way, and I was just really unimpressed. Next, the storyline itself is just really meh. Honestly, just trying to stop Arthur Harrow from freeing Ammit, and then they have to go travel around, and it's basically like Lord of the Rings, but worse. I'm going to put all the comparisons, but yeah, honestly, storyline was just really meh, and I just felt like it wasn't really amazing. Next, it's not really a superhero show, kind of brought that up briefly, with it being more of a character drama piece work, and really just didn't feel like, a superhero show. And then finally for my major complaint is that there's going to be no season 2. So they can't even go back and fix what they've already done. They can't go back and they can't really update or change things. So yeah, no season 2. And I think I also forgot to talk about the use of original stories in this. So this kind of just goes in with the characters. Honestly, almost everything in the show has nothing to do with the comics. They replace characters from the comics. Like Layla is basically just a new character who replaced Marlene. Compared to the comics, with Arthur Harrow, he showed up for one issue, but now they're using him in, like, using work from Lemaire's run, and putting him as Ammit from Lemaire's run, if I'm getting that correctly. It's been a while since I read that book, but basically, they just kind of switched around characters, changed things, and, I mean, with Arthur Harrow at the end, I guess it works with him being a psychologist, but for the most part, it just really doesn't. And yeah, they just kind of changed around a lot that just did not need to be changed. And I think this is going to really be the thesis of this video, is change for the sake of change doesn't work. That's what I felt like they were trying to do with the show. Oh, we're going to change it from a superhero show to a horror show to the character drama. Okay, but why? I really can't tell you, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Oh, we're going to interchange a bunch of characters and create a new character to replace a more famous character. Oh, that's a cool change, but why? I don't know. They did to change things. That's kind of how I felt with like a lot of this show, is just change for no reason. It's like, okay, this can be cool, and then they go nowhere with it. It's like, okay. And that's kind of like where I'm going to really end this at, is that this show's really met. It's as middle of the road as you can get, as non-offensive as you can get for a TV show. I mean, it's a little bit more violent, but honestly, just the generic Marvel show, but watered down in a lot of senses. And this show could have been rated R. I think it would have been better if it was rated R. It could have gone further with the character. I think it would have been better if there was more Moon Knight. But overall, this show, oh my gosh, it just is not the best. I would probably score it a 5 out of 10, maybe a 6 out of 10. I'll go back and forth upon those two scores. But yeah, I forgot about one more thing. I hope I have enough time to talk about this. But Stephen Grant in the comics, Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, sure, two different personalities, but the big reveal that Stephen Grant isn't the original during the show literally saw that coming a mile away. My whole family saw that coming a mile away. They don't even know who Moon Knight is. They didn't even know who this character was getting into the show, like what he's all about. And they saw that twist coming without even knowing the character. So that's how weak that twist is. The twist in the show, weakest twist you will ever see because it's so obvious. It's not like a show like Seven or a movie like Seven or The Usual Suspects. It's like if you watch The Usual Suspects 40 times and then you come in and it's like you watch it again expecting something different, but instead the twist is just like, okay, cool. You'd probably get the same reaction out of that as you would get with Stephen Grant's reveal in the show. And that's how bad the twist is. Yeah. But overall, 5, maybe 6 out of 10. Not the best. Middle of the road for me, honestly. Like, actually, not even middle of the road. This would actually be ranked lower than pretty much every single Marvel show for me. I think the only one ranked lower I have is, what is it? Falcon Winter Soldier. That's it. That's how kind of trash the show is. And I'm a huge Moon Knight fan. I'm happy they made a show, but it could have been so much better, and I wish it was. Thank you for watching my long review of a show and me ranting about Marvel not doing things well. If you want to see more reviews like this, let me know. I'd be happy to make more reviews, especially on future projects. But yeah.